it's a couple of days before Christmas here in the Midwest, although probably all over the world. We do tend to think in terms of self, and this movie coming up that we're reviewing is all about the ego, all about the self, and how ultimately love and compassion are the two core elements in disassembling the self. So we're going to be talking about Scrooged with Bill Murray and an all-star cast. How are you this morning, Barret?
I am doing really good, Chris. I am really excited to be rebooting our spiritual movie review that we've had a number of so far, and to do it for this holiday classic is really fun. As we were planning this, and as I mentioned to you, it's been a really long time since I watched this movie, so I was really glad that we made this the first one in our reboot here. And as I said, also I'm always a big fan of any Bill Murray movie. I haven't seen too many of his movies that are total flops. I'm sure there are a couple, but it seems like pretty much he seems to be good at picking the winners, and this one definitely is in that category. So
yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because Roger Ebert gave this movie a 1-star rating, which I always thought was a very limited ability to understand what was going on with the movie. So once again, the reason that movie critics aren't actors is because they can't attain that height, and so they become critics. And but this movie is all about, it's almost like Network in some ways. It's all about how television rules the lives of people and how we are programmed to respond to life by the media, and it's all around us. And this is such a perfect example of that, because it was from that era, you know, in the 80s, when technology was just on the horizon as this tsunami that it has become. So it is, looking back in retrospect at the movie, you can really see that it was giving us a vision of what was on the horizon.
yeah, some of these movies really do kind of point us to that shift that it's almost like there's so many screens in our life that we're feeling like we're always looking at a screen, or we're always interacting with the screen. And so to see that more clearly, it starts to help us to see that really we're always looking at a screen, right? This whole experience of our lives here is actually just an image projected on a screen that we call this world. And we think it's really real, just like, you know, a kid watching TV or a movie might think what's happening on that screen is real, but in fact, none of it's really happening. And I know that might not be kind of the major point of this movie, but I think we can kind of see that a little bit, the way that this is going on. And even to the level of one of the ghosts, Ghosts of Christmas Future, in this case, had like a TV screen for a face. So it's kind of an interesting idea to think about. Oh wow, you know, we're always looking at images, and it actually reminds me of one of the spiritual thought systems. This little tidbit that comes out of one of Gary Renard's books, Your Immortal Reality. His teachers give us a couple little nice quotes, and one of them I like to use pretty often, which is, when, you know, kind of thinking about ourselves, we say something like, "I am immortal spirit. This body is just an image. It has nothing to do with what I am." And as we kind of practice that and repeat those sorts of ideas, they start to sink in deeper and deeper. And again, the purpose of this is not to tell us that we're not anything, right? But it's to help us to let go of our false ideas about ourselves, so that what is true can be revealed. And what is true, of course, is always love and peace and kindness, which of course is also the outcome of this movie. So I think it all kind of dovetails really nicely.
It absolutely does. And the thing that you notice first off, as you start to enter into the movie, is that there is this rage that Bill Murray has, and it builds and it builds and it builds. And that is so indicative of the ego. The ego knows no other response to life than anger, rage, frustration, and ultimately death. So as we enter into this relationship that we have with Bill Murray in the movie, we see him on every corner doing things that increase his rage. He's completely out of control. He's completely submitted himself to the ego. And, you know, the ego grabs a cab from a little old lady. I mean, he's a nasty guy. And
not only that, but he flips her off.
Right. After taking one of her presents and dropping it behind her without her knowing it and then pointing it out. I mean, he's kind of a vile guy, especially since it's Christmas Eve. You know, all of these things are building up to a crescendo. But the reality is that that false sense of self has really dominated him to the point where he has no spiritual life and no spiritual values. It's kind of a good launch into an examination of who we are. You know, what is it that is the primary focus in our lives? What are our values, and what are our goals in life? And we see him attaining mastery of the world through the use of media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the beginning of the movie in particular, yeah, this kind of getting to know Bill Murray and, you know, what a jerk he is in so many ways. It really reminded me of a section in the text of The Course of Miracles near the end of the text in chapter 31 called Self-Concept versus Self. And this section of the Course talks about the part within all of us that's the face of innocence. And Bill Murray's face of innocence doesn't look so innocent, right? Looks kind of like a jerk and kind of like he's bullying. But you can see a few different ways where he thinks he's innocent, right? And because we always do, we always think that we are the innocent party and other people are the reason for our unhappiness, right? That's the ego trick that it sort of sets us up for again and again. But that whole dynamic was so overt with him because he had a little bit of that, but it really, you kind of saw the next layer under the face of innocence, which is the sort of the monster energy. It's the anger, it's the rage, it's the upset. That was much more clear in him. But again, neither of those two faces are his truth, right? And neither of those two faces are our truth either. We all have those parts within us as well. We have to keep going deeper until we get to what's real, and what's real is the love and the kindness and the joy. And it's sort of that whole journey basically is a part of this movie too, of Bill Murray sort of going below these surface layers of who he thinks he is so that he can actually access the truth of who he is. And you know, his journey in the movie really parallels all of our journeys on this path as we're doing our work, looking at our angry and rageful parts, our victimized and innocent, you know, face of innocence pieces where it's really an angry and attacking part of us that's just wearing a mask. So to look at all these parts of ourselves and to realize, okay, that's not the truth of who I am. I want to go deeper. I want to move through this. I want to heal this so I can come into that. And in the movie, it was sort of thrust upon Bill Murray, right, by these ghosts that visit him, as is so common in these Scrooged stories. But in our lives, it's actually something that we choose, right? We choose to say, I want to heal from this. I want to release this old dynamic, and I want to come into more peace. So, yeah, and in a way, he really did make that choice, even though it did seem, again, a little bit more forced on him in a certain way than we often feel in our lives.
Yeah, we're given some insight into that as you know, as we enter in on this journey. The first ghost, the ghost of Christmas past, takes him back to his childhood home, where his younger brother is still in the womb, and his father comes home with a package of veal. It's obvious that his father is a butcher, and he gives his son this wrapped up chunk of veal for a Christmas present. poor kid is hoping for a train, and it's not going to happen. But it once again falls into that rhetoric that the ego offers us about how we are victims. You know, in this instance, he was a victim of his father, and that kind of dark nature of somebody who's just miserable and not happy with life at all.
Mm.
But once you go back further than that in your own consciousness, you realize you selected all of the people that appeared in your life before you came into this life for the sole reason of making choices. And so early on, he made the choice to follow his father. But by the end of the movie, he suddenly realizes that life itself is something so completely transcendent and beyond the trivialities of the ego that, you know, he completely casts off the ego and embraces life eternal. And it is a beautiful, of Course in Miracles movie in that you can really see how all of the different aspects come together to form that catalyst for self-realization.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's a funny and modern take on our very treasured Christmas Carol that we all know so well, and where Scrooge, you know, has these deep revelations and sees in a very deep way. And again, without having a sort of external ghost visit us, we can open ourselves up to these ahas as well, and we can have these letting down of our inner barriers and fears to our truth, just because we want to. We don't want to hold on to the burden of these defensive pieces of us. So one other thing I want to mention as we're talking about the beginning of the movie is that there's a really funny part of a commercial with I think Robert Goulet, where he's in the swamp, and it's like he's going to have a Cajun Christmas, and there's an alligator chasing him. I was like, that's awesome. I mean, there were a lot of these sort of little funny moments that just jumped in throughout the entire movie, and I think that, I don't know, I think that's helpful too, in a way, in a sort of a bigger message about life, is that there can be all these serious things happening in our life, but if we take it all too seriously, you know, we're actually kind of getting hooked into the ego. The ego is the thought of seriousness. So if we notice that we're getting really serious about something, add a little levity, right? Find something funny. Go watch a little comedy, or sometimes I'll look up comedians on YouTube and watch some of the clips of their stuff, and it just sort of changes my attitude and my state of being. And I think these sorts of things that happened in this movie as a part of the script, we can sort of introduce into our lives as a way to find more of these elements in our life, and to make this whole experience seem a bit less heavy, a bit less intense. So, which I think is especially helpful around these holiday seasons, which seem to be kind of either really good or really bad for people. You know, people either really love the holiday season and get a lot out of it, or it's really hard and people struggle through this time. So I think for those of you out here who are in the latter category, make sure that you kind of take care of yourself and give yourself some love and kindness as you go through this time of year.
Yeah, that's very sage advice. Within this movie, the ghost of Christmas Present comes through in a couple of different ways that are really very insightful, and again, very much aligned with Course in Miracles. The first is the catalyst that causes Bill to stop and question what's going on with his life is an old girlfriend that he had kind of discarded 15 or 20 years earlier. And once she comes back into play, you're reminded of a lot of thoughts that the Course offers us about the holy relationship, which is beyond just the physical attraction. And that relationship we have based on the ego's needs and desires. And it's obvious that Claire, his old girlfriend, has been living that kind of a lifestyle. You know, she lives a life of service. She works in a mission in New York City, helping children and homeless people. So while he has been on the rise in the world of the ego and has become the dominant figure in media, she has gone in the direction of compassion, love, and service. And that turns his head when he encounters her. That causes him to stop and look at his life and give it a little bit more thought. The other part of that same passage that Christmas Present gives us is his secretary's son, who is mute, but not because of an actual physical process, but because the child witnessed the death of his own father. And at that point in life, stopped speaking. And you can see the beginnings of a bond being formed between Bill and this child, because he's recognizing in that child a part of himself that he had walled off, he had closed off, he had become silent about. And as the movie progresses, you see him, as a result of his compassion for the child, you see him lifting the child up. So at the final outcome, you have this wonderful validation that love is a healing element, and that applying love to your life can heal your life. So there's a lot of good stuff in this movie. It's got a lot of overlays and layers of really cool ideas, and I definitely recommend it for everyone. I think it's a great Christmas movie.
Yeah, I give it a thumbs up too. I'm not sure what was going on with Ebert that day. Maybe he just was having an off day when he gave it 1 star. But I really like what you were saying about a connection to the boy, his secretary's son, that he was kind of connecting back to his own inner child. And I think, again, this time of year, that really is evocative of the section that you and I just talked about a couple days ago, Chris, which is Christmas as the end of sacrifice in chapter 15 of the text. Because what it really is talking about is it's talking about how the Christ child is born within all of us. And that in each and every moment, we can choose to let that inner light come forward, that baby be born, in a sense, because we are choosing the thought system of love and kindness. We're letting go of the thought system of fear and hate. And the more that we practice this, the more it starts to become our default way of being. We don't hang out in the fear and the upset as long as we used to. We don't choose the anger and the jealousy as deeply as we had in the past. These things might still come in, but then they also move out. And then what happens? Well, we're left in the state of deeper happiness and more joy and more fullness of heart. All of these things become more and more our natural experience. So this is really a perfect Christmas kind of symbol, that even though maybe that piece wasn't as explicit in the movie, that it really is what this is all about. It's about letting that light that's within you come forward and shine out. And whether you think of it as, the birth of Jesus, as that symbol that is the birth of the light, or whether you think about it like this movie where Bill Murray has like a spiritual awakening and comes back to his humanity and his real true self, all of these things become symbols for us to awaken to that light within. And that's what it's all about. The Course is all about making a choice, and that choice is available to us in every instant. Are we choosing thoughts of kindness and love, or are we choosing thoughts of anger and fear? Once we notice we're doing the latter, then we don't want to do it anymore. So we just notice it, we let it go, we step back into peace. And again, it's just again and again and again. We just practice this over and over until it becomes our norm. And that's what we're all here for.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how as the movie progresses, he is forced to actually confront all this stuff. He's forced into change by circumstances that he has created, and that's how it works for all of us. We set ourselves up for all these disasters. And once we are put in that position of having to face the things from the past that we have created, it often is that breakthrough moment. You know, Eckhart Tolle in his book talks about how in the very opening of the book talks about how he was in a state of deep despair and desperation.
Mm.
And, you know, he was like at the verge of suicide, ready to throw himself off the cliff. And suddenly he has the breakthrough experience with Bill Murray. And, you know, his breakthrough experience is with Bobcat Goldthwait, who is just supreme. You know, Bobcat is the Bobcat. You can't really say anything more about that. And he's got a shotgun, and he's blowing up the office, and it's really, really hysterical. But it's also the way that we set ourselves up so the Holy Spirit can confront us and can say, do you want to continue with this? Because you're probably going to die, you know, or at least you're going to experience the illusion of death. Or are you willing to make a change? Are you willing to let go? So when Bobcat is chasing him around the office, firing off the shotgun, you get to see all of these images that are so concrete being shattered, being blown away. And as a result of that, he makes that final step where he's able to release. And he comes up with that brilliant statement, I am alive. See, and once you realize that, once you are beyond the ego's illusions and you realize you are life itself, that's when the magic really starts.
Right. And it's interesting, again, I think when you think of all the ways that this showed up in the movie, it was one ghost after another ghost after another ghost. Well, when we talk about the Course, we don't use the word ghost, but we do use the word Holy Spirit, right? Which is sometimes called the Holy Ghost. So we have this realization that we all have a helper within. And again, in the movie, it showed up as in a physical way, and it, you know, kind of made him look at these parts of his life. But in real life, it usually is a little softer, right? That presence is always here for us. It's always available to us. But it's a matter of, are we willing to reach out to it? Are we willing to reach out to the spirit within ourselves, to the light and the love that's always there, waiting to guide us and support us in our life and on our journey? But maybe we haven't really been reaching out to it. Maybe we haven't been choosing it. And it's kind of a tricky line here, because a lot of times people who are working on this path and doing this work, they feel like they are asking kind of diligently and conscientiously, but they might not feel like they're getting a whole lot back. Like, this is an experience I talk to a lot of people and they have. Just know that sometimes we do have blocks to, you know, hearing or receiving or really knowing that we're getting that guidance back. But as we chip away at it, as we persist and keep practicing, those blocks will all fall away. So if your current experience is one where you feel like you're not hearing or getting messages from the Holy Spirit a whole lot, that's okay. That's okay. You're going to move through this block. It just might take a little time. But once it does shift, you're going to feel like you really do know. You're going to feel like you have this presence and purpose in your life. And that's something that we're all moving into. So again, some of us might be experiencing it more than others, but that presence is actually always there, whether or not we're very conscious of it. And, you know, I know the movie kind of ended when it did after Bill Murray's epiphany, but I kind of had a little question in my mind, like, oh, is Bill Murray gonna keep this up? You know, is he gonna stay in this state of happiness in life? And that's sort of a choice that we often make too, even though we might have steps forward. Well, are we going to keep going with it? Are we going to keep going deeper with it? Do I really want this to be my whole life? And hopefully the answer is yes, because that's the path that leads to peace and the path that leads to happiness. So that might have to be a sequel to the movie or something. So
Well, I also think, though, that because Bill Murray had not just witnessed his own cremation, but found himself in the casket,
Mm.
and screaming hysterically as the flames are amping up. That sort of thing, it can be something that does make you realize that you need to make the change a permanent change,
Yeah.
and that you really push yourself every day to stay in alignment with life, because you have experienced that darkness of death so viscerally. And a lot of people who have near-death experiences, they come back with very complex stories, and a wide variety of stories. But by and large, people who do have that experience have a tendency to be much more committed to life once
Mm.
they have gone through that process of realization. So it is interesting how the movie definitely gives us a lot of reinforcement with our own spiritual practice and our own spiritual journey.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the kind of the insights around that maybe is not as explicit in the movie, but it connects to the course, is the realization that this physical world is not our truth, right? So, again, maybe that didn't show up as much in the movie, but it's sort of a part of this realization, this letting go of the old way of being and stepping into really a state of love and flow. The deepest way that we can get into that state of flow is actually by completely detaching from expectations of outcome, from not really having any dogs in the game, so to speak. We just sort of allow things to unfold, and yes, we take action, we do whatever is appropriate, but we don't necessarily feel like that is what matters. What really matters is our experience, and our experience, if it's one of love and kindness, then of course we're going to be doing and saying whatever is loving and kind. But if it's one of fear and judgment, then our actions are going to kind of reflect that as well. So you could say that this movie and the course itself, they're all about sort of bringing up the darkness so that we can unearth it and let it be removed for us by the Spirit. So I think that idea of looking at some of these darker places within, it's important, and it's actually a key part of our healing work that we need to make sure that we allow that to happen too. It's not often fun, just like Bill Murray's experience of his own death and being burned in the cremation process. That's pretty intense. But by going through it, by looking at it, by witnessing it, all of a sudden he was able to release it in a very deep way and come into the fullness of the presence of the now. And that's why kind of the very scene at the end when he sort of interrupts the whole movie or the whole live TV show that he's been coordinating for months. It's more important. It's more important to be present with what's here and with the people that are watching. And you can just see that like the Spirit's kind of flowing through him, and everything he's saying is coming from love and kindness. And he's not denying his old insanity. He's mentioning it and claiming it, and not hiding from it. But he's also not feeling guilty over it, right? He's just acknowledging, okay, I've made some big mistakes. But in this moment, we can all choose kindness, and we can all choose love. So it's a beautiful, end of the movie. It's so rich and deep and strong that comes through for him. And I think it sort of is that message that we've been talking about this whole time, that light is always here for us, and we want to remember that we can make that choice as well.
Absolutely. And the kind of the final gift in the movie is, as Bill Murray goes through his release and his transformation, he manages to carry his secretary's child through that portal as well. And so the whole thing ends with this kid who has not spoken a word in 5 years coming up with, that most typical referenced quote from A Christmas Carol, which is God bless us, everyone.
Hmm.
So you see a lot of different levels of transformation and confrontation. Initially, Bill Murray is oblivious to the fact that he is destructive and kind of a hideous person. But by the end of the movie, he has so completely shrugged off that image of self that you can see the joy and you can see the beauty of life that he is embracing and bringing into manifestation everywhere around him.
Yeah, yeah, and again, it just comes back to that choice, right? That choice point to acknowledge that we've been holding on to fear's hand, and to say, I don't want to hold this hand anymore. I want to let it go. And as soon as we let go of the hand of fear, the hand of the ego, we're automatically picking up the hand of love. There's only two options. It's always one or the other. It's sort of like an on-off switch. It's either on or it's off. We're either holding on to the ego's hand or we're not. And again, that's the switch that Bill made, and that's the switch that we are making. Every time we notice maybe some unkindness in our life, did we have to make that one comment to, that family member, that person in our life that we care about? That really was kind of unkind. I want to acknowledge that, but I also don't want to beat myself up over it. And these sorts of, whether it's seemingly big, like a whole life change, like Bill Murray's character had in the movie, or whether it's even a sort of intimate, small thing like that, these things are not really big or small, actually. Every switch from fear into love is a miracle. Every switch from fear into love is coming into the holy instant. And that's what we want to do again and again and again. Obviously, it happened in this movie in a very humorous and very overt way. But it really is at its core, it's just this one switch. It's this one switch that we all can make. So the key component to that switch is to just have the willingness for it. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. When we don't, again, it's important that we're not hard on ourselves. We're just maybe not quite ready. But at some point, we will all be ready. We'll all come into that state of knowing that there is nothing to fear, and that nothing bad has ever happened, and that we're still safe at home in the oneness of God. And like the little boy said at the end of the movie, God bless us, everyone, that we are all blessed by God's love, and we are all one. And that's really what matters here. It's the only thing that really matters. And just like Bill Murray's character had that epiphany, all the things he thought mattered, he realized that they weren't important. Well, so many of the things that we've been valuing, they're just like that. They're the fool's gold. It glitters and shines, and it might be tempting, but it's not where our happiness lies. And we're starting to wake up to that fact. We're starting to catch on to the ego's tricks, and they don't stick as much once we get that. So I think, again, there's a very kind of beautiful, funny, overt message in this movie. But I think if we really look at what it's saying, it can hit us on so many different levels in our personal lives.
Yeah, the entire movie, wow. The sun just came out from behind a cloud, it appears. But the entire movie, the greatest gift, of course, is the ending of the movie where Bill reconciles himself with all of humanity, and he has a voice and a medium whereby he can connect with a large portion of humanity. And even though it seems like our personal lives, our little mundane existence really doesn't have that much impact, every time somebody rejects the ego and embraces life, it does affect people all around the world. And I think that that's, again, a big part of the outcome of this movie, that we need to realize that even though we're not aware of it, every thought we have and every deed we commit to does have an impact, and it impacts literally billions of people. So if we expand our vision of what life is and who we are as participants in life, we begin to realize how little the ego offers and how diminished it is, but how magnificent the spirit that we are is, and how much power we contain within us. So it's a beautiful movie all the way around. I highly recommend it. I think that people should pick it up and check it out every once in a while, and just, not just for Christmas, but when you're in a funk, this is a good movie to go and pull off the shelf.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. And just like for a while there, the light was expanding and kind of sucking you in. It's like this whole movie's about the light expanding, right? Let the light expand within you. Remember what Christmas is really about, which again, Bill Murray's character did by the very end. And Christmas is really about love. Be kind, be compassionate. Somebody pushes ahead of you at the supermarket, don't get angry. It's just not worth it. Realize that maybe they're having a bad day, and cut them some slack. And every time you cut someone else some slack, you're really cutting yourself some slack. And as we kind of do that more and more, this is really what transforms the world. Like Chris said, it doesn't have to be a big thing. You don't have to be a network TV person who's going to make a speech to millions of people. You can be just in the comfort of your home, and you can be kind to your pet. You can be kind to a neighbor who's walking down the street, or you can be kind to the people that you're going to be with on Christmas. All of these things just really, they do add up, and they do make a difference. And there is, as Jesus says, there is no order of difficulty in miracles, which means that every shift into kindness, big or small, is actually the same. And they are all equally important in our awakening to the truth. So if you have a chance to be kind, don't let the opportunity pass you by. As Jesus says, not because that opportunity won't return again, but because delay of joy is meaningless. Let the joy be here now, because it can be. It can be if we open up to it more and more.
Absolutely. Well, Barret, this is episode number 8, and hopefully over the next year we'll add a number of different reviews to this thread of looking for miracles in the movies. So you, I would assume, are going to be very busy for Christmas, as I myself will be, but we want to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas and an inspired and dynamic New Year.
Yeah, definitely. As we go through our lives here, again, just one last reminder: let the Christ child be born within you. And as you go through these holiday celebrations, remember again what this is all for. And yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to some joyful celebrations, and I'm glad to hear you've got a lot of fun stuff going on too. So I know we have any number of movies that are sort of percolating in the minds that we'll be picking one of those next, and we'll let you know as soon as we get it figured out.
Absolutely. Well, don't let any reindeer, detour you by little reindeer drops on the sidewalk of your life. I know that. And we will connect next week for another The Miracle Within episode.
All right. Sounds good. Merry Christmas, man.
Merry Christmas. Bye.
Bye.